Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Ian Nguyen, who is an Australian-American physician and medical technology entrepreneur. He received his medical training at the University of Melbourne and entered pediatric surgical and critical care training before immigrating to US to pursue graduation studies in healthcare innovation at Harvard University. He was a research associate at Massachusetts General Hospital, the Benson Henry Mind Body Medicine Institute, and has trained with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, Institute of Functional Medicine, and Dr. Nguyen is the founder of Vitalize, which serves over 100 hospitals in America, whose programs deliver cutting-edge technology programs to accelerate human health and well-being. So he's going to present on science, spirituality, and the future of medicine. Over to Ian Nguyen.
Hi,
Nguyen, I request you to present your topic on science and spirituality. We're waiting for you.
Hi, Dr. Yugandhar. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name's Ian Nguyen. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Yugandhar. I've been a doctor and a medical technology entrepreneur for about the last 15 years, and it's been an honor today to attend and speak at this virtual gathering. And I've been amazed at the very wide range of ways that spirituality has been applied and all the ways that we are expressing our connection to something bigger in the many different fields of life. And so today I wanted to talk to you about how spirituality is a very important part of my life and how it's played into my study and practice of both science and medicine. And I'm very involved in the field of medical technology, both right now in terms of developing and delivering programs for people, as well as we have a great interest in developing and looking into the technologies of the future. So I thought I'd speak a little bit today about my background and some of my sort of spiritual lessons that have been important to me, how that's played out into my medical career, firstly as a doctor, and then as more of an entrepreneur trying to find ways to help people at a larger scale. And then finally, I want to talk about, how spirituality can come together with science and how, there are some really important and exciting implications of that for the technologies of the future. So for most of my life, I would consider myself a very spiritual person. It wasn't always like that. My parents were actually refugees in the Vietnam War, and they escaped Vietnam at the time to Australia through a refugee camp. And I grew up actually in Adelaide in South Australia and went to the University of Melbourne for medical school. And so I was brought up quite secular. We were taught in our family that the only thing that was important was education, and there was very little spirituality. I think my family was very proud of me when I got into medical school. My dad's a doctor in Australia still, in Adelaide, and I worked very hard to get there. That is until one day when I was around about 22, I woke up and not sure how or why, but felt an intense desire to find, know, experience God and spirit. So it was about that time that I started to discover many different and wonderful paths in spirituality, including mystic Christianity, Tibetan Buddhism, and finally I settled on the yogic practice of Kriya Yoga. And so I ended up actually taking a year off medical school and made a pilgrimage to India. And I ended up with a long beard, in some robes with my Rudraksha in South India. And I actually lived in South India, mainly around the Aurobindo ashram in Pondicherry, as well as the Ramana Maharshi ashram in Tiruvannamalai near Arunachala mountain. And really that was the time when spirituality took a huge presence, the most important presence in my life. It was definitely some of the most amazing times of my life. And I definitely feel like through the practices and through where I was totally immersed in seeking God and spirituality. There were many lessons that I learned, but there are a few important ones that have stayed with me to this day that I think are important. The first is that, as I started practicing and having more experiences and more learnings, I came to see that, the world, whatever it is that we call life, we're all connected. And Kriya Yoga is what they call evolutionary practice, which means, we don't just sit there and try to find, a state of God or of unity, but that, God is something that we live every day. And indeed, in Kriya Yoga anyway, there are practices, attention, acknowledgement of that all things are spiritual. So, our practices were for the body. The body has its own type of way of, experiencing spirit and expressing spirit, our emotions and our mind and our thoughts. These things also have their own practices of spirituality and coming to be more and more connected to the whole. And then, of course, we go on to a second lesson of that there are things beyond the mind, beyond what we think and what we think we can see or know. And as you do more practices, this something else becomes a source for everything that we do. And so I ended up being in South India for maybe, 6 months. And it was at that time that my parents really had enough, and they actually went and found their own spiritual teacher, a monk, and my mom came and told me, Ian, if you were meant to be a monk, you would have been born in the Himalayas, but you were meant to be a doctor. So you should go back to Australia and go back to medical school. So while I had discovered, some of the secrets, I think, of the universe, still didn't know how to argue with my mom. So I ended up going back to Australia and going back to medical school. And I actually, what had been spirituality had been my practice and my religion. I turned that into medicine. So I worked very hard and then ended up finishing my medical degree, doing my internship, and I was overjoyed to get a job at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. It was the only job in the state for pediatric surgery. And I thought, even to this day, that, that was some of the best times of my life. I don't think there's any better place to learn about the gift of being a healer than to be around children. And so it was still quite hard, and I threw myself into learning and applying all the physical sciences of medicine, of practicing medicine mainly on the physical body, and I thought that this was the way. There are a number of experiences, however, that started to change my world. I had really left behind some of the practices that had given me so much insight earlier on in my life, but it didn't feel right. The type of healing and the type of medicine that we were practicing could do a lot of amazing things in trauma, intensive care, surgery. These are all very advanced. We're very advanced sometimes in helping people who are at the point of physical death. There were a few experiences that happened to me that started to bring me back and helped me come to try and find a way to bring spirituality back into my work and how I lived. The first was when I was working in the intensive care, and I had a childhood friend who had just moved to my city of Melbourne. She was 24, and I think she was at the prime of her life. She got sick one day and ended up in our ICU. And we tried really hard. She had a pneumonia. We worked very hard to throw all of our knowledge and learning and teachings of modern medicine to try and save her life. We put her on steroids, a ventilator, a heart-lung bypass machine. But no matter what we did, within 72 hours, she had unfortunately passed away, and it made no sense to me whatsoever. I was heartbroken, and I could not understand, with all the supposed power that we had with science and modern medicine, we couldn't do anything about this very young and beautiful person to save them. And so it was at that time that I started to really ask questions of what I was doing. And I had been now, steeped in the world of science and biomedicine for many years, 4 or 5 years. I had really started to feel I had lost a sense of connection and peace with that I had known from my days in India and doing intense spiritual practice. And I kind of felt, I knew it was time to start to look for that again. And so that's when I started to travel around the world, trying to find ways of doing medicine, of understanding healing that made a bit more sense than, what I had come to in the conventional medical world. I ended up at Harvard University, where I had been referred to from a couple of my mentors, and ended up at a place called the Benson Henry Mind-Body Medicine Institute. My boss at the time, Dr. Herbert Benson, was one of the first physicians, he's a cardiologist, to work with the Dalai Lama to study how meditation is important to health, in the Western world anyway. I know in the East, in India, that study has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. So I felt very blessed. It had taken a few years to find something that made more sense, but I had the privilege of working at the Benson Henry Institute on a heart disease reversal program, where we had taken learnings from all parts of the human experience, things that are understood by spirituality, but things that often are ignored by medicine. And so the program there was 12-week program, and there were different modules. Of course, there was bringing balance to the physical body, removing toxins, making sure there was harmony in the food that we ate, making sure that the physical body could be a physical foundation for health. But it didn't stop there, unlike normal medical practice. We also had a module about relationships, and the Institute had done some of the most cutting-edge studies about the impact of love, intimacy, and relationships on health, how having a relationship in your life, or having many relationships in your life, changes at a very fundamental level the hormones in your body, and how those hormones go on to affect all kinds of biological functions that promote health. And obviously there was a module there on mind-body practices, of finding a way to regulate attention, to still the mind, to become aware that all of these things in our experience are not really us. We're not the body. We have a body, we're not the body. Of emotions, we have emotions, but they are not us. They are not all of who we are. We call it cognitive restructuring. So becoming aware of our thoughts, but also becoming aware that our thoughts are not who we are. And so I became amazed at this program, because not only did people seem to get better, but they seemed to find the opportunity to achieve health on every level. And in fact, I think we collected some data, and we showed that all of the patients who went through the program also had a deeper and more extensive experience of spirit. And so I wasn't surprised. We actually did a very comprehensive, prospective, triple-armed crossover study on this set of heart disease patients. And we ended up showing that using the wisdom of spirituality and combining that with science, we were able to help these patients who had heart disease reverse that heart disease to the point where our mortality rate was twice as good as standard medical care. And the medical care for this program was being provided at Massachusetts General and Harvard Medical School, one of the top hospitals and universities in the world. And so it was hard for me to go back to what we call conventional medicine after that. So for the last 5 or so years, we have been working very hard to find the latest sort of technologies and approaches, while at the same time not forgetting all the very important lessons that the traditional teachings of spirituality bring us. And so I think in closing, we definitely are very excited for the future. I think there's a lot of scientific work being done all around the world. Out of Stanford, there are a group of scientists working on intentional devices where they've been able to achieve miraculous results. In Phoenix, Arizona, we've had the opportunity to work with a biophotonic camera that measures emissions of light that every cell in the body shines out. And this camera has been shown to be able to detect disease many months before traditional CT, MRI, and so on and so forth. And we're also looking at projects around what we call vibrational therapeutics. The idea that, our body is not made of bits and pieces. It's made up of vibrational energies, of light waves, sound waves. And not only can we detect disease earlier if we come to understand this teaching, but we can also, in a much more effective and non-invasive way, start to bring healing, not just to the body, but the mind. And it all comes together for me because health really doesn't end with, staying alive. It ends with finally being connected to all things. So that is where we're at in terms of science. And I think that we must never forget our spirituality. And in fact, it opens doors for us to many, many opportunities where our people, our countries, and our world can finally have the healing as what it should be.